Language is the key to connection with others and with one's own identity. As a child of immigrants, in addition to rigorous academic studies at school, I took private lessons with a Russian tutor in order to maintain my literacy skills in the Russian language. From a child's perspective, the tutoring lessons were a chore, a monotonous weekly task that I simply had to endure for the sake of my parents. But to them, the Russian language was so much more than just a language. It was an old dear friend, a nostalgic reminder of their youth living in the Soviet Union, a place they initially called home. From a young age, I was expected to communicate my thoughts, feelings, and expressions in Russian. And it would be difficult, trying at times. When I'd have something on my mind, the words I needed often escaped me. They would get mixed in with my English vocabulary, yesterday's school lesson on Pythagorean theorem, a term definition I learned for a historical event in global history. I'd begin to stutter, unable to express myself. I felt caged and limited, as I knew that freedom of expression was something that I was entitled to. I began to feel shame when I paused, attempting to find the correct conjugation for a verb or the correct term for something. Naturally, that shame led to resentment. I began to resent my parents for forcing me to speak Russian. The duality of relationship with language and home country between me and my parents was something that I constantly found myself ruminating over. I questioned as to why they prioritized a language that was merely a memory of a distant past, a past I had never even experienced. Essentially, English was my mode of normality. Except our individual identities and national identity is so much more complex than that. In the modern United States, a significant portion of the population is made up of immigrants, particularly in larger cities. Did you know that 40% of New York is made up of immigrants? For so many of these immigrants, the issue of assimilating into the American society and culture is a pressing concern in their lives. Many immigrants approach assimilation differently, but regardless of how they do so, children of immigrants inevitably distance themselves from the native culture of their parents. Both immigrants and their children are under immense amounts of pressure to succeed in the new country, and cannot do so without a certain degree of assimilation, whether it be wearing Western clothing or surrounding themselves with American acquaintances. Many immigrants welcome and embrace that change that comes with living in a new country, in America, and some don't. The difference in this attitude is key in determining the extent to which their children become estranged from their parents' original culture. One of the most important aspects of assimilation into American society is the adaptation of the English language. While doing so, many immigrants still continue to maintain that proficiency in their native language and encourage their children to do so as well. But what happens when parents choose not to teach their children their native language, or if a child forgets or progressively forgets the language that they are being taught? It is evident that forgetting one's parents' native language is a common occurrence in this day and age. We see countless first-generation Americans feeling the weight of guilt or emptiness that is associated with losing proficiency in a language that potentially ties them closer to their cultural background or other family members. It goes without saying that the loss or progressive loss of a language is a devastating event that creates communication barriers, estrangement between family members, and creates a disconnect between a person's identity and their ability to associate themselves with a certain culture, especially when that culture leans so heavily on the language the individual has forgotten. It is of paramount importance that we understand and acknowledge that the loss of proficiency in a language, forgetting a language, is not instantaneous by any means. In my own life, I was conditioned to practice and exercise my ability to speak Russian on a daily basis. But that practice was constantly undermined and counteracted by my other everyday activities. You truly know a language when you convert feelings and notions into words. Russian had lost that context in my life. I understood that a value of a language stems from its use, and I certainly wasn't doing much using. This experience is so much more universal than I'd ever imagined. And by reading articles and looking into other people's accounts involving maintaining or losing proficiency in their parents' native language, had brought so much more clarity to my own experience. First introduced to me by my senior year English teacher, Mr. Lossow, during a class unit that involved the exploration of the origin of language, I first read about Jenny Liao, a fellow Brooklyn Tech alumni, as well as the author of Forgetting My First Language, an article written for The New Yorker. Jenny Liao is a first-generation American and a child to immigrant parents that had come from China. Jenny Liao had always struggled to assimilate into American society. She was constantly teased and bullied for the different foods that she would bring in for her school lunch and the different language that she spoke. She felt like a true alien. But as she grew older, she began to undergo a steady and gradual process of assimilation in order to fit in. Jenny used English anywhere and everywhere. All of her school, classwork was in English. Almost all of her communication with others had been in English. Sound familiar? Cantonese had lost that familiarity, meaningfulness, and context in Jenny's life. Jenny felt like an outsider. Her parents saw her less and less as her school workload and other commitments took priority. Eventually, Jenny's Cantonese became so poor that her parents, who could only speak Cantonese, had to use Google Translate in order to communicate with her. A central theme that emerges from Jenny's account of her experience with language loss is the cost of assimilation. But our differing experiences indicate that there's an entire spectrum of perception of what assimilation truly means to each and every family, and how far our parents are willing to go in order to assume the identity of a true American. In my own life, I combine both Russian and English to create a smooth blend of the two languages in my everyday sentence structure. Mom, I need сахар and мука to make the cookies. Did you know that Оля for the first time водила машину на highway? Да, я не могу imagine. My friend, Mayan, a child of Vietnamese immigrants, also describes blending two different languages together to create her own personal Vinglish. The mixing of languages tends to be a touchy subject for some, as proficiency is what seemingly everyone wants and strives for. But I've come to a personal realization that combining different languages to make my Ringlish is a testament of the journey that I've undergone, coming to terms with my unique identity. One of the most widespread examples within the US of combining another language with English is Spanglish. Spanish is one of the most commonly spoken languages within the United States, with around 41.7 million American speakers. Many children of Spanish-speaking immigrants incorporate elements of the English language into the way in which they communicate with their family and with each other, otherwise known as Spanglish. Spanglish has undergone extensive development and change as the dialect has been passed generation to generation, with journalist Sophie Hardak emphasizing the idea of each generation adding its own unique twist. But this phenomenon of combining and mixing various different languages together to create another language isn't anything new. Even our beloved English is a mix of French, Latin, Germanic, Greek, and a multitude of other languages. But this really begs the question, who are we to say what does and doesn't constitute a spoken language? If English can act as this massive melting pot of various different elements and speech from a multitude of different cultures and languages, who are we to say what does and doesn't constitute a spoken language? Why are we drawing the line at Spanglish, Ringlish, even Vinglish? The acceptance and acknowledgement of blended languages is incredibly important when understanding and viewing the evolution of a language. Many commonly used words in today's Russian take direct inspiration from English. Words such as computer and business sound the exact same in Russian as they do in English. But in relation to myself, the combination of both Russian and English serves as a reminder of my dual identity as both a child of immigrants as well as an American citizen. The growing attitude of embracing being bilingual and knowing a language other than English has not always been prevalent in immigrant communities within American society. The process of assimilation, whether unintentional or purposeful, was once a necessity. On an online Quora forum, when the question, why do some immigrants choose not to teach their children their native language, was posed, it elicited several replies. Tom Orr, a son of Finnish immigrants, described his experiences of having been shielded from his Finnish ancestry and culture. As living in Minnesota, being associated with being of Finnish descent and background would have put him and his family at a disadvantage, stating that they are classed somewhere between the white man and the Native Americans. As a result, my mother did not teach me or my sister Finnish. In another example of immigrants getting rid of their native language, we have Jamie Perez, who talks about his boss's experiences with not knowing the French language. She said that when she was a little girl, her mother had forbidden her entire family from speaking French, and had even changed their last names to sound more American. In both Tom Orr's and the French boss's experiences with not knowing their parents' native language, both individuals were prompted, encouraged to do so by their very own parents. But this doesn't surprise me, as immigrants have always felt alienated and ostracized because of their different native language and cultural backgrounds. Immigrants have felt alienated, especially when they feel the feeling of being considered the other, when they decide to rid themselves of that connection to their native culture and language. But without a doubt, our country has come a long way following a fast track of evolving views on the acceptance of various different cultures and languages. While there is still present nuance in how people view and react to blended languages, and the difference of outlook on the presence of immigrant pressure to assimilate, the growing willingness and intrigue to learn about different cultures, languages, and backgrounds is stronger than ever. Did you know that according to the U.S. Department of Education, 1/2 to 2/3 of adults across the globe speak at least 2 languages? In today's global society, such people have numerous advantages. Globally, bilingual and biliterate adults have many more job opportunities than monolingual adults. In today's digitized world, social media is on the rise, bringing about unimaginable change and momentum and becoming an important aspect of worldwide interaction and communication. It's now common for an American to see a video clip of a Japanese anime with English subtitles, or a video of a cute dog with a Russian-speaking owner. It's become quite clear that the exclusivity of the English language has been substantially reduced with the presence and introduction of social media. Apps like Duolingo or Zoom classes with instructors who live on the other side of the world are now easily accessible to those who are keen on maintaining proficiency in another language. There are relatively few accounts that genuinely delve into what it means to lose that connection to one's parents' native language. The emotional aspect, the cultural aspect, the change to one's concept and to one's identity. The psychology of linguistic and cultural assimilation is a relatively undercovered topic, which may indicate that having achieved success, few like to expose the progression made from their former foreign origins and associations with their new identities. From bringing awareness to immigrant pressure to assimilate, to understanding the emergence of globalization via social media in today's America, I've come to a personal realization that this phenomenon of contradictory, conflicting, and complementary forces involving language possession and loss is an ongoing process that continues to evolve and change and impact all of us in countless different ways. The development and progression of our country follows a fast momentum, bringing about change in attitude and perspective towards the acceptance of different cultures and languages. But the question still remains, will you be a part of this fast momentum and embrace the ever-present change? Looking back, my relationship with the Russian language came from a place of shame, hesitance, and fear because of familial pressure. I felt nervous and anxious when talking to my family members. But I've realized that language is a malleable construct, something I've slowly shaped to suit me and my needs in the form of my beloved Ringlish. As of now, I use Russian and my Ringlish to communicate with my friends and family in hopes of reestablishing that once close bond I had with my parents' dear old friend. Thank you. Thank you so much.